Penn State football training camp is underway, and we got a lot of answers to some of the most pressing questions about this team for this upcoming season.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And you are locked on to Penn State football. As always, thank you so much for checking out another edition of Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily source for all things Penn State football, wrestling, basketball, recruiting, you name it. My name is Zach Seiko, and I am your host of the show as we are talking about early takeaways for Penn State football. And this is a live show, so your questions, your comments, your thoughts are appreciated over in the live chat. But I'm going to share my pressing takeaways here about the tight end battle that doesn't have anything to do with tight end number one, doesn't have anything to do with the starter. There's an answer there. Some interesting things that were actually at practice. So there was media day, but I think we're going to have some interesting wrinkles with what Penn State wants to do in the ground game. Talk about other position groups, how secondary doesn't really have a lot of answers outside of A.J. Harris and Zachy Wheatley, but there's plenty of talent for them to sort through. So I think it's fair to start overall with what James Franklin talked about and the injuries, and how the injury list is a lot longer than he would like it to be, but it's not concerning at this point in time. I didn't see anybody or anything out of the ordinary other than Caden Saunders. And it was reported by On3 that Caden Saunders is going to be out with a long-term injury. So I didn't see him at media day. They made most of the players available. He was not available. He's going to be out long-term. And I mean, that's a big deal in terms of depth. That's a veteran wide receiver, but you have Trevor Pena, who you got through the transfer portal. You have Devontae Ross, a bunch of others in the punt return game. Liam Clifford's still in the wide receiver room. So slot receiver at least has depth, solid options, really solid with the addition of Trevor Pena. And punt return, there's so many players that can return punts. That Caden Saunders, it wasn't make or break with him. So it's unfortunate. It's disappointing that Saunders, I don't know if he's ever going to live up to those high 4-star, very close to being a 5-star expectations, just because of the bad luck that he has dealt with. So, but all the quarterbacks were there. All the running backs were there, aside from Caden Saunders. All the wide receivers were there. Didn't see anything out of the ordinary with the offensive line. So James Franklin, when he says, hey, we're dealing with a bunch of bumps and bruises, the injury list is pretty lengthy, but it's not of concern because no one is missing. Everybody's practicing. But I get what he's saying. When they go through the contact drills, when they try to hit and things like that, I think that's why there's probably a questionable label for some players here and there. Okay, so now what stood out to me between the quotes, what I saw at practice today, lengthy practice. We got a good amount of time, and I spent a lot of time around the offense, quarterbacks, running backs, tight ends, wide receivers. There is no tight end battle for the number one spot. There is no position battle there. James Franklin was not so subtle about who is the number one tight end going into this season. It's not Luke Reynolds. It's not Andrew Rapplier. It is Khalil Dinkins. Khalil Dinkins is the clear-cut number one tight end. And I think it's obvious to this point with the way that he just continues to talk about him. Questions brought up at media day. Hey, what do you like? Basically, what do you like about Luke Reynolds? What's impressed you the most? What are your expectations for him this season? And before he even talks about Luke Reynolds, he discusses Khalil Dinkins and that not enough people are talking about him. He's going to have a long career in the NFL. That's high praise. Somebody who hasn't even finished their college career. And James Franklin's already talking about an NFL career for Khalil Dinkins. So Dinkins is tight end number one. I think it's obvious. To me, there shouldn't be any more speculation. If you have your doubts, if you have your reservations, that's opinionated at this point in time. I think objectively, Khalil Dinkins is by and far the number one tight end. Now, is there a battle on the tight end depth chart? Absolutely. I think Luke Reynolds and Andrew Rapplier, they are battling for that next set of reps. because Penn State wants to run 2 tight end, 3 tight end sets. Heck, I'd even extend it a little further. And tight end 2 is the one that's up for grabs. You know, when it's crunch time and Penn State wants to run 12 personnel, Khalil Dinkins and who? Because when you go into that final drive of the game, it's the final 5 minutes, Penn State's behind, and they need a drive to seal the deal. Or if they're leading and they need a game sealing drive, who's going to go in? I got to imagine that Luke Reynolds and Andrew Rapplier are close, but I would probably lean Luke Reynolds, and that's because Andrew Rapplier is coming off of a season-ending injury from a year ago. It was out long-term. His leg has a brace on it, right? So this is a situation where Rapplier is probably not 100% to this point, and I think that Reynolds, with all the optimism, his potential, former 5-star, I wouldn't sleep on Andrew Rapplier. I think once he gets going, Rapplier is going to see a lot more consistent playing time. But initially, my tight end depth chart for Penn State looks like this. Khalil Dinkins, easily number 1. Luke Reynolds leaning him as the number 2 player. But Andrew Rapplier is at practice. He is practicing. He's going through the reps. He's there just like everybody else. I would include Joey Schlaffer into the equation as well. I think Penn State, why they feel so confident that they can run 2-3 tight end sets is because you do have a 4th option in Joey Schlaffer where there's not the significant fall off after those first few players. You have the depth. And then don't forget about Andrew Olish or any of the 3 tight ends. They brought in 3 tight ends in this class of 2025. So Penn State's tight end room is insanely loaded. But it starts and ends with Khalil Dinkins. Luke Reynolds, I think, will progressively break out. I don't know that we're going to see the best of Luke Reynolds right out of the gate. I think we will see him progress as the season moves on. And then Andrew Rapplier, same thing, same deal. Redshirt sophomore, one of the top tight ends in the country coming out of the class of 2023. Penn State couldn't be in a better spot. Now, there was an extremely interesting wrinkle with just a couple of drills that I saw with the running backs and the quarterbacks that leads me to believe that Andy Kotelnicki has a few tricks up his sleeve with what he wants to do with Nicholas Singleton, Katron Allen, and the other running backs. That RB3 spot is ultra important going into this season, and we're going to discuss that coming up next here on this live edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. And today's show is brought to you by DripDrop. If you're trying to stay on top of your routine, whether that's workouts, long days on campus, or staying focused through back-to-back classes, hydration is where it starts, and that's where DripDrop comes in. DripDrop is doctor-developed and scientifically proven for fast hydration. It uses the perfect balance of sodium electrolytes and glucose to help your body absorb fluids, quickly delivering 3 times the electrolytes and half the sugar of a leading sports drink. And I've tried DripDrop for myself, and I got to say, it is as good as advertised. I got the 0 sugar variety pack. So if you're worried that, it's not going to taste good with the 0 sugar, no, you still get a full amount of flavor from the 0 sugar, and I'm the variety kind of guy. So I like to try one of everything, whether it's like lemonade or orange or all the different flavors that I get to try with that variety pack. I got to say that DripDrop is worth it. Right now, DripDrop is offering Locked On listeners 20% off your first order. Just head over to DripDrop.com, use promo code LockedOnCollege. That is DripDrop.com, promo code LockedOnCollege for 20% off. Stock up now before the heat hits hard. And thank you so much for joining me on this live show, this live edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. Great to be here for year 4. Thank you for making this platform incredible, what it is. The everydayers, the people that support this show, Locked On Nittany Lions wouldn't be what it is without all of you. So bring your comments, your questions, and we'll talk about anything. I am going to pick up with the running backs, but if you got a question or a comment, we will talk about it. All right, so here's something worth discussing. Penn State has a pathetic out-of-conference schedule. They should be disqualified for postseason play. Pathetic. Well, I don't disagree with you that it's a pathetic non-conference schedule. Come on now. Nevada, FIU, Villanova. doesn't exactly strike fear into the hearts of opposing football teams, right? To say they're disqualified from the postseason, I know you're exaggerating, but to actually respond to that, that's the point of the Big Ten schedule. They play 9 conference games. Okay, it was different in the past when you didn't have as strong of a conference schedule. But when you add Oregon, when you add Washington, USC, UCLA, you expand the college football playoff. It was different. It was different not too long ago. But it's the combination of the expanded playoff, 9 Big Ten conference games with those added teams. It makes those conference games even more valuable. So, yeah, it's boring. It's a cakewalk. The first 4 weeks of the season, that's going to be really slow for Penn State. How much is there to analyze after Nevada, FIU, Villanova, right? Then there's a bye week, 4 weeks that we got to wait until Big Ten Conference play with Oregon. I will say, though, Penn State will not be battle tested going into that Oregon game. Oregon will have Oklahoma State and Northwestern by that point in time. So the Ducks will certainly be battle tested. Whether that affects Penn State or not is going to be yet to be seen. So if you're a rest versus rust, if you side on the rust side of the debate, saying that, yeah, you're going to have to shake that off and that's not going to play well, Penn State's not going to play well if they're rusty, then you might have an argument for why you're picking Oregon over Penn State in theory, right? I think it's worth mentioning, talking about the non-conference schedule and Penn State going into Big Ten play. Like I said, if you got any questions, comments, feedback, let me know in the comments section. You're a part of this discussion too. Let's talk about running back, because Andy Kotelnicki, based on this one drill, is going to have an interesting wrinkle in the offense, I think. They lost Tyler Warren. They lost Bo Pribula. Where does Penn State go from there? That's a portion of your offense. Not the biggest portion, but something, a change of pace, something to keep the defenses honest. Andy Kotelnicki talks a lot about confusing defenses, keeping them on their toes. Okay. Well, you can't do that anymore when you lose both of your Wildcat players. So who's going to run that Wildcat package? If it still exists, I think it does. Not Drew Allar. No, he'll be a part of it. He'll factor in. Don't get me wrong. But Penn State at practice today had drills where the running backs were sending Drew Allar in motion. Again, this was public practice for the media. This was open practice for the media. And they're showing us this. Which means that, okay, for what it's worth, I think this is a big deal. The running backs were working on handoff, read options with the quarterback in motion. Well, there's your Wildcat. Your Wildcat is not going to be Tyler Warren and Bo Pribula this year. It is going to be Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen. Quentin Martin and Corey Smith, Cam Wallace. That's the interesting wrinkle. That's the interesting takeaway. That Penn State is going to get a lot more creative with its running backs. And when I got to talk to Andy Kotelnicki one-on-one today at Media Day, his biggest takeaway with what Singleton and Allen are doing is that they're more than just ground and pound running backs. They're going to be used in a variety of ways. So we are going to see them ascend past what they've been as just battering rams. You know, Nicholas Singleton takes a pitch, goes 70, 80 yards. That they're more than that. That they are true playmakers. And the running backs are going to be very valuable this season. James Franklin also talked about running 6, 7 offensive linemen. This is going to be a power run team. You have Drew Allar. You made the additions with the wide receivers in the transfer portal. Kyron Hudson, Trevor Pena, Devontae Ross. This is still a run-first team because of the offensive linemen that you have, the depth that you have, the fact that you can run 6, 7 players at offensive line. That's the way that Ohio State and Michigan beat Penn State the last 2 seasons. I hate to bring that up. You know, we want to forget about that. That's in the past, but Penn State might lean on that as a way to close games. Just think about that. You line up 7 offensive linemen, Singleton, Allar, Allen in the backfield. You have Khalil Dinkins. Maybe you have Kyron Hudson as that boundary receiver. And you just say, we're going to run it straight up the middle and you're trying to stop us. Well, Michigan did it in 2023. Ohio State did it last season. Why not Penn State? Andy Kotelnicki is a run-first coordinator. Now, I know that he says, hey, we'll do whatever it takes if we need to run. He jokes about running 10 offensive linemen. He jokes about, I don't even know it's a joke, because Penn State could, in theory, this season run 4 tight ends. I don't think that one's a joke. Maybe the 10 offensive linemen. Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. Penn State can do a lot of different things that are unorthodox, uncharacteristic for college football. And it's going to work. So Andy Kotelnicki will do what it takes to win if it is unorthodox, uncharacteristic. But when we're talking about the realities of X's and O's and football, yeah, Kotelnicki is going to get creative. There are going to be a lot of 3 tight end sets. There is going to be running back wildcat. 3 running backs on the field at the same time. This is an interesting note. Who is leading in the running back 3 battle? Corey Smith, Quentin Martin, Cam Wallace. Cam Wallace is coming back from a season-ending injury, long-term injury. He's back. He's practicing, right? I like Corey Smith a lot. I think he's a speedster. He's one cut and go type of running back, smaller build. I think Quentin Martin wins out because of the versatility. I think he's the best pass catcher. He might not be the fastest or the quickest, but it's that balance that he's got a little bit of speed. He's got acceleration. He's got size. He's got strength. I think he has the best pass catching ability of the running backs. Maybe Singleton does with the time that, because he's a 4th-year back. I would say that Quentin Martin quietly might be the most gifted pass catcher of the bunch out of all the running backs, leading me to believe that he'll be the running back 3, but that doesn't mean that Corey Smith's just going to ride the bench, that Cam Wallace is just going to ride the bench. They have 5 running backs when they're all healthy that can play. Those guys can all play and be reliable, be consistent. So that's what Penn State's going to do. They're going to lean. So Andy Kotelnicki's already a run-first offensive coordinator as it is, and then he's going to continue to lean on that when he has the resources, the assets to do that. So we'll talk about some other takeaways too. Again, if you got any questions, comments, let me know your thoughts in the live chat. But secondary, okay, AJ Harris, Zach Wheatley, those are the staples in the back end of the defense. But what is Penn State going to do everywhere else? Because they don't know who cornerback number 2 is. Who is the slot cornerback? Who's the strong safety? Well, they got to answer all of that, but they have the talent to have no issues there. That is coming up next here on this live edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. And this episode is also brought to you by Gametime. We've all been there, logging on early, waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show that you've been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That's where Gametime comes in. Gametime makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. And get this, prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime. You can save up to 60% off with their killer last-minute deals. And they have tickets for not only concerts, comedy, theater, sporting events, Penn State football tickets. You can get Penn State football tickets on Gametime. And if you've never been to Beaver Stadium, well, you're in luck, because they have a game-changing feature where you get to see the seat view ahead of time. It's a panoramic seat view. So if you've never been to a venue, you've never been to a stadium, you've never been to Beaver Stadium, you want to go to a Penn State football game, you will get that point of view ahead of time, so you don't have to second guess yourself, and you'll know exactly what those seats look like. Take the guesswork out of buying concert tickets, show tickets, football tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create that account, redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, we'll wrap up with the secondary. Again, these were some initial takeaways. There's a lot of things that are going to be discussed over the course of the next few weeks as there's more confidence in Drew Allar. Again, running backs, tight ends. We're going to keep an eye on those position battles, even though we're starting to get some clarity there. Secondary is going to be interesting because outside of AJ Harris and Zach Wheatley, we don't know who the starters are for any of those other spots. This is a 4-2-5 in Jim Knowles' defense. Elliott Washington and Audavian Collins are battling for that second cornerback spot. But don't think just because Penn State doesn't have any answers right now as far as the starters, who are the starters. But with what they have with Washington, Collins, Jim Knowles continues to bring up, I think it's interesting that he brings up two players in particular, unprovoked. Darius Dixon, true freshman, out of the state of California. He's supposed to be a high school senior this year. Apparently he graduated early. And now he's at Penn State. He enrolled early. And then you have Zion Tracy. You have Kenny Wosley. So that's the other player. So Kenny Wosley and Darius Dixon are the two players that Jim Knowles brings up unprovoked pretty consistently. Those are the two names that you need to watch as guys that will just figure themselves into the rotation. So AJ Harris is cornerback number one. He's going to take away one boundary or follow the number one receiver, however Penn State wants to operate this season. After that, Elliott Washington could be cornerback number two, Audavian Collins. I think that one's close. Washington has a case just because he's a freakish athlete. I mean, in terms of strength, speed, he's a cornerback and he can do a lot of things that cornerbacks can't do athletically. He won all those Winter Workout Warrior nominations. He went 6 for 6. Well, that's worth saying something. But Audavian Collins, I like that he plays with a chip on his shoulder. I like the way that he'll talk his talk. He's physical. I am not, just because Elliott Washington is insanely athletic, and it's not that Collins isn't, but Collins, I just like the nasty streak that he seems to have as a player. But Penn State can't go wrong with either one. Really, I don't think there's an incorrect answer. If it's Elliott Washington as that starting cornerback number two and the Audavian Collins cycle in, vice versa, Penn State really doesn't have a wrong answer there. They might rotate frequently. Cornerback number two has always kind of operated that way over the past few years between Manny Diaz, Tom Allen, where it'll be that one superstar. This year it's AJ Harris. Not too long ago, it was Joey Porter Jr. And then Kalen King and Johnny Dixon shared, right? There was cornerback number one, the star player, and then cornerback number two was a co-starter with two really good players. That's Elliott Washington and Audavian Collins. The slot cornerback, I think that's going to be Zion Tracy. I have to think that's going to be Zion Tracy. There's a lot of optimism for him. I think he's another breakout candidate. He came on strong later on last season. Didn't practice this spring, dealing with some bumps and bruises. He's going to be all right. They brought King Mack back in through the transfer portal, but I think King Mack might be utilized at strong safety. The slot cornerback position isn't going to be as much of a head-to-head battle. I think it's going to be Zion Tracy, and then that's where, okay, maybe you can play Audavian Collins. If you have Elliott Washington on the field, Audavian Collins isn't on the field, you can put Collins at the slot. Kenny Wosley, Darius Dixon. They're loaded at cornerback. They are truly loaded at cornerback. Where my question mark is at strong safety. I like Dejon Lane. I think he can be a good player, but I don't know that he's progressing the way that Penn State would like him to. Strong safety is the position that fans should circle as hopefully that one's not a liability. Lane has a lot of potential. James Franklin talked, positive about him, praised him as someone that was coming on strong, but then we never it's kind of the same thing with Tyseer Denmark. Hey, Denmark, generating buzz. Dejon Lane, he's ready to go. And those players never really made their way into the rotation frequently. So why is that? Well, the practice, if you don't practice, you can't, and I'm not saying they didn't practice, but if you don't live up to those expectations in practice, then you're not going to play. They want Dejon Lane at strong safety because when you run a 4-2-5, you need somebody that's going to be a bigger, stronger body. Dejon Lane operates at 6'2", 210. That's a smaller linebacker. But there's no clarity right now at strong safety. I think King Mack might end up being the starter just because the extra year of experience. He's more of a polished player. Dejan Lane, I still think needs to refine some skills, be a better tackler. If you look at, Pro Football Focus isn't the end all be all, but it is a helpful resource. If you look at it, Dejan Lane's not a good tackler. Has a high missed tackle rate. Well, you can't have that as a strong safety. As a strong safety, you are an extra linebacker. You play close to the box. You are essentially a smaller linebacker who's meant to be a little more proactive in coverage, but you're still there to help against the run first and foremost. If you can't tackle, what good are you? So Lane, he has some questions to answer about himself as a player. And if he can't in time, then King Mack's going to be your starter. I don't have any quips with the 3 cornerback spots. Penn State is in great hands with A.J. Harris as that star cornerback. He's going to be one of the top players in the country. He'll be all conference. I'm not too familiar with defensive backs across the country, cornerbacks in particular. But A.J. Harris certainly has the potential to be All-America. I can definitely book it and say that he's going to be first or second team All-Conference. All-America, I'll reserve that because that's top players in the country, right? Elliott Washington, Audavian Collins, Darius Dixon, Kenny Wosley, Zion Tracy. Your cornerbacks are set. That's your rotation of your 6 players. King Mack, Dejan Lane at strong safety. Who's going to back up Zach Wheatley, Antoine Belgrave Shorter, Vabu Toure? I don't know. I don't know what those guys can do. James Franklin mentioned them that they're all battling for playing time and they're trying to work out playing time. I like Belgrave Shorter and I like Toure. I thought they had solid blue and white games, but that's a spring game. It's a glorified practice. That doesn't mean a whole lot at the end of the day when it comes to week 1, when it comes to the 2025 season. But I got to imagine if I'm going based off of the blue-white game and recruiting rankings and everything else, I got to say it's Antoine Belgrave Shorter as the backup, but I don't know what he can truly do on a regular basis. So that's why I will routinely say that if Penn State, outside of Drew Allar, if there's one player that Penn State cannot lose for an extended period of time, it is Zach Wheatley. Because safety has a lot of questions before answers. Maybe you consider moving a cornerback to a safety spot to help out. We'll see what Penn State ultimately decides, but that's where things kind of initially stand after media day and practices. So Caden Saunders injured, out for the season. As we go back to the live chat, thank you. We'll try to sneak some of these questions and comments in here. I can't confirm or deny whether he's out for the season. He has a long-term injury. I don't know if he'll be back this year, but doesn't bode well for Saunders. It is disappointing, as I mentioned earlier in the show. They've been playing a Power 5 team and they're out of conference. Why can't they go a season without it? Plus, Ohio State did the same thing last season. Yeah, if we're talking about the out of conference schedule again, hey, Penn State's going to play Syracuse soon enough, right? This just happens to be there. It's not like Indiana where they're, and I have an episode coming out where I talk about, Penn State's non-conference schedule isn't the best. They're not canceling games. They're not going that far, but it is weak, but it's not as detrimental as people think because the Big Ten Conference is as strong as it is. Corey Smith should be RB3. He's the most explosive and the most elusive. I'm a huge Quentin Martin fan in this situation, but you can't go wrong with Corey Smith. They'll play. Cam Wallace will play. Corey Smith will play. I just think Quentin Martin will be the next running back that is utilized the most. Arrington can provide help with coverage. He's shown he's good at it. We're talking about LeVar Arrington II. If LeVar Arrington II is playing a lot this season, I'd be surprised. I think he's going to go for that through that red shirt. He's got all the athleticism in the world, but I think the game is a little too fast for him at this point in time. Again, true freshman, beginning of training camp. A lot can change over the course of this season. Audavian Collins told me he has the number 2 spot locked up at an NIL event last Thursday. Think he was just, that's what I mean though. Okay, so that's where I will finish things here with this final comment. That's a great point. Collins, hey, maybe he's just being confident, but that's what I like about Collins. And you see it in practice. The guy is vocal. He's loud. He sets the tone. And I want that in my defense. I want somebody like that. That's not afraid to, you set the tone with that kind of energy. So I like Collins a lot. I do think Elliott Washington is absolutely more athletic, but sometimes you just can't teach that it factor. Davian Collins is a guy that's going to contribute one way or another, whether he's a starter or not. So those are some of the initial takeaways from fall camp here, media day, plenty more. Be on the lookout for it all here on Locked On Nittany Lions. There are press conferences, exclusive interviews from media day today. Go check them out across the YouTube channel. That's going to do it for this edition. Thank you so much for the people that contributed their comments and thoughts in the live chat. Be on the lookout for more of these live shows as we continue to go through practices and everything. We will be here all season talking about all of it as the updates roll in, the news, and so much more. Subscribe to the YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts so you don't miss out on any of this. Thank you so much for joining me on another episode of Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily source for all things Penn State sports.